Hello and welcome to News in Depth on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. Tonight on News in Depth, we examine Europe's response to President Donald Trump's escalating threats over Greenland and the growing strain on NATO unity. We also turn to Iran, where deadly protests, an internet blackout and new US tariffs are intensifying pressure on the regime. Joining us is Marcin Zaborowski, Europe editor, TVP World. Marcin, welcome. Great to have you back. Thank you.
Delighted to be here, Ashim.
Thanks for taking the time. So, as usual, we'll kick off with a short soundbite, and then I'll get your view on it.
Okay.
The meeting went quite well. Denmark and Greenland drew a line in the snow. They made clear that there's this red line. There's no talks about territory. So we put it on the conversations continue on a diplomatic level, where it's about economy, it's about security, it's about things that we can actually do something about. We can't do anything about if another country wants to take our territory. That's, of course, a limit. So we could have hoped that the US kind of got the message that we're taking security seriously and there won't be any talks about taking our territory. So he was very honest about it. But I still think it was successful, and I think it was intelligent to point to the case of the Panama Canal. So 1 year ago, Donald Trump also talked about taking over the Panama Canal, but Panama cleverly made a deal to increase U.S. presence and foothold in Panama. So I think with that experience in mind, it'll serve Denmark and Greenland well in the forthcoming negotiations.
So that was Mark Jacobson from the Danish Defence College. He was talking about the meeting that was held yesterday between the Danish and Greenlandish, I think, foreign ministers, J.D. Vance and Secretary Rubio. There are quite a few things that he said there that I want to talk about, but overall, your impression of what he said?
Well, he was hopeful. He suggested that there could be a deal in the making. Judging by what came out of a meeting yesterday with the Danish Foreign Minister Rasmussen and the Greenlandic Foreign Minister, I would be less optimistic. They both said that fundamental differences remained. Fundamental differences being really that the United States wants the island. And Denmark does not want to give it away. And the Greenlandic people, they gave a very strong argument to the Danes by saying a few days back that if we have to choose, we prefer to stay with Denmark. So, but still, it looks like that the Americans are not backing away, but President Trump is keen to actually have the possession of the island, to own the island, not to have some kind of special rights. And what the Danes are saying, the model of Panama Canal is something that we could live with, but there will be no concession really on the part of Denmark, because in reality, Denmark is already saying that the treaty which exists there between Denmark and the United States allows the United States to have as much military presence on the island as the United States wants.
Yeah, so it sounds as though both sides are fairly entrenched in their views. I mean, Rasmussen, the Danish foreign minister, talked about red lines. And as you just said, the American side isn't backing down either. But they have agreed on a high-level group to further discuss this. What are they going to discuss? I mean, something has to give way, doesn't it?
Something has to give away, absolutely. And I think that indeed, I mean, this is hopeful, but first they come out of a meeting and, they say, differences remain, but we continue talking and there will be another meeting in Copenhagen next week. Let's just see who's going to come to the meeting from the American side. If it's some low-level officials, that means that the Americans are just, pretending to be in the process, but in reality they are not. Yeah. But if it's Marco Rubio or one of his deputies, then it means that that the Americans really want a better deal than what they have right now, but perhaps will be prepared to give up on the claim to have the island.
Right. So there is, keep our fingers crossed here, there is the opportunity for some concession on that. And Mark Jacobson referred to the Panama Canal deal, where Trump's initial line was, we're going to take over the Panama Canal, but they eventually negotiated some kind of compromise. So assuming that a high-level delegation goes to Copenhagen, they have this meeting, what do you think America will ask for?
Well, I think that from what I understood from the communication from the Danish foreign minister is that the Americans are still really want to own the island rather than to have some increased rights. So maybe something in the vicinity of some kind of a treaty which allows United States to have the exploration of rare earth materials, for example, to have them, to grant them a temporary ownership of some of the part of the Greenlandic territory, which is absolutely massive. Let's just picture it. The island is 6 times bigger than the territory of Germany. Yeah, so it's like the entire Western Europe together. Yeah. And on that territory, you have a population of 57,000 people living in settlements which are not connected by roads. So if you go to Nuuk, from Nuuk to Ilulissat, for example, you can only go by boat or you can fly. You can, there's no any other way.
Drive there.
So it's not like that Greenland is an inhabited island full of some settlements, people and, businesses, yeah? But it's just still almost like a virgin land, yeah, with extreme temperatures, with very, very underdeveloped infrastructure. So it's another thing whether the Americans really truly know what they are getting themselves into.
Well, yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned the minerals under the ground. Now, Trump has been speaking less about those and more about the fact that, well, strategically speaking, they need to own it because Russia and China will be able to take it over and Denmark and Greenland won't be able to stop them. Does he have a point? He
does have a point on that. And the Americans fought the same thing during the Second World War. They were afraid of a Nazi invasion taking place from the territory of Greenland. And indeed, when you look into the map, Greenland is very, very close to North Africa, to Canada. In fact, during some severe weathers, apparently Inuits can walk from Greenland to Canada because the Atlantic gets frozen, and you can get there by foot. Yeah?
Right.
So the vicinity is almost like a Cuba in 1960s. In the 1960s, when the Soviets, placed the rocket launchers on Cuba too close to Florida, then it was like almost a declaration of war to the United States. And that's why the Americans, knowing about it, in the 1940s, before the Nazi invasion of Denmark, they had a deal with Danish ambassador, whereby Denmark seized its ownership rights to Greenland, to the United States, for the period of the German occupation.
Right.
And during these 5 years, the United States controlled Greenland.
So there's actually no reason why that can't be repeated. Now, I do want to move on to Iran, but before we do that, one more question. Now, a number of European countries, so France, Germany, some Nordic states and so on, are sending small numbers of troops, Denmark, of course, as well, to Greenland and they call it different things. Reconnaissance is one word that is being used by the countries to explain these. Now, they are very small numbers. We're talking about, in the single digits, most of them. What's behind that? What's the message?
Well, I guess the message here is really to tell the Americans, look, we are serious about defense of the island. We can defend it. It's not strategically neglected. We are investing in being here. But as you said yourself, the numbers are so small. that they are not going to impress the Americans. Because the key concern of the Americans is that's a vast piece of land very close to North America, which if being owned and finding itself in the possession of the Chinese or the Russians would mean, an existential threat to the United States. And I'm not sure whether the Americans will be impressed with the fact that 15 French troops are landing on Greenland right now.
Nor the Chinese, nor the Russians. However, Prime Minister Tusk of Poland had a slightly different view, but he had some quite strong words. I think we've got a soundbite on that coming up.
We're not planning to deploy Polish troops to Greenland. Today isn't really the time or place for a detailed analysis of the geopolitical and military consequences of a potential armed intervention by the United States in Greenland. It would be a disaster in a political sense and from our point of view, an attempt to take over the territory of a country that is a NATO member by another NATO member state, and what's more, it's the United States. Well, that would be the end of the world as we know it, which has guaranteed our security for decades and guaranteed the world order based on NATO solidarity that keeps threats in check in Europe and in North America.
So Prime Minister Tusk not holding back there. No Polish troops going to Greenland, but some fairly strong words. What's that telling you?
Well, I think it's easier to deliver strong words than to actually deliver action, and that's regrettable because if Poland wants to appear as being on the side of Denmark, of the Europeans in that debate, that should be followed by a decision to actually even symbolically send some troops to the exercise in Greenland. But unfortunately, is not happening. I think it's unfortunate, but that's the government's decision here.
What do you think's behind that decision?
I think that two things. Number one is being extremely cautious. Poland sees its security and defense policy as connected to the United States and doesn't want to do anything to offend the United States. But I think it's unnecessarily cautious because, Great Britain is the closest ally of the United States, is sending symbolically one soldier. I mean, it's of course, strategically it's not making any difference whatsoever. But yes, symbolically the US is saying, we are with Denmark on that.
Right.
And, I think Poland should do the same.
Okay, let's move on to Iran now. There have been protests going on against the government that were triggered by economic pressures, very high inflation, the collapse of the currency, the rial. But those protests have expanded in their scope, and they're now calling for the downfall of the regime. The regime's response, as they've done previously, has been extremely violent. They've been using live bullets. The numbers of casualties and fatalities is unknown because there's an internet blackout. But some sources are saying up to, many thousands, 10,000 or more. Now, in response to all of this, of course, President Trump made some threatening statements, saying to Iran, stop the killing or we will take serious action. American bases in the Middle East were, troops were pulled out of those, and America looked poised to take some military action. But then today, President Trump said this.
We've been told that the killing in Iran is stopping, and it's stopped and it's stopping. And there's no plan for executions or executions. So I've been told that on good authority. We'll find out about it. I'm sure if it happens, we'll all be very upset, including you will be very upset. But that's just gotten to me, some information that the killing has stopped, that the executions have stopped. They're not going to have an execution, which a lot of people were talking about for the last couple of days. Today was going to be the day of execution.
All right, so two questions. First of all, how serious do you think Trump was when he threatened to take military action if the killings didn't stop?
Difficult to say, but I mean, I would say that there were indications that the United States was preparing, was poised to intervene. Indeed, there were, as you said yourself, they were withdrawing personnel from Qatar, which is in the vicinity of Iran, as well as they were communication from the State Department telling the American nationals who were residing in Iran, apparently there are some, to leave as soon as possible or to take cover. So it looked like that yes, that something was happening. But I think strategically, the United States is not quite ready. Why is it not quite ready? Because it has deployed almost all of its aircraft carriers to South America, to the vicinity of Venezuela. And that just shows that, having two conflicts happening at the same time is difficult even for the United States. So I think that the Iranians knew that indeed, that would be extremely difficult for the United States to carry out an operation without an aircraft carrier being in this area. But this is not to say that it's still possible that it will happen, because before this operation in Venezuela happened, it also looked like that things were coming down. And then suddenly, whoops.
Right, right. So this might be part of a kind of a negotiating stroke strategic play
yes.
by America. Now, President Trump says that this information is good. He's getting it from very good sources, that the executions have stopped. So on the face of it, it looks like the regime has said, OK, well, we're scared of being bombed by America, so let's do what Trump says. Now, how likely do you think that's the regime's calculation?
I don't think that this is what they would say. They would say something like, we never planned to execute this man. This information was wrong. This is not something what we do. I think that indeed the Iranians know that at this point in time, if some public execution was to happen, Trump could be left with little choice but actually to do something pretty radical. It would not necessarily have to mean a land invasion of Iran, but it could mean a couple of missiles, the cyber attack, something of that nature. And there is still a possibility of that happening, I think. Yes?
Right.
So Iranians, for now, they are pretending that that they never had the intention to execute anybody.
But does that indicate to you a sign of weakness from the regime? Do they feel threatened?
I think they do. I think that there were a number of indications that the regime felt threatened. The total internet blackout, the actual indiscriminate shooting of protesters, the fact that all the fractions of the mullah government came together, the moderates, conservatives, all the others. They decided that this is not a time to show our fractions, but it's time for unity because our existence is threatened now. So they knew that a revolution was a very likely possibility, and it still is. But of course, it's very difficult for people to protest on the streets when they're being shot at.
Right.
Indiscriminately, with no defense, and with the regime clearly consolidating.
Indeed.
So this is not the right moment. But
yeah.
if this protest is being crushed right now, what would follow is apathy.
Yeah.
But this is the regime completely lost its legitimacy right now.
It has lost its legitimacy, and who knows what's going to happen next. But we shall be watching closely, and hopefully we'll continue this conversation very soon, Marcin. Thank you, as always.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of this episode of News in Depth. Don't go away. Lots more coming up. Goodbye.